Welcome back to the ProTicker Podcast, your Thursday morning edition covering major financial magazine headlines.
Everyone.
Everyone. So get ready because we've got some big ones today.
Yeah, buckle up.
We're diving deep into Bitcoin's record-breaking surge, whispers of interest rate cuts in the UK, political earthquakes shaking up Europe, and a U.S. auto giant making waves in China.
Sounds like a roller coaster.
It is. So let's start with Bitcoin. It just smashed through the $100,000 mark for the first time ever. Bloomberg's calling it crypto world's victory lap.
It's been quite the journey from a fringe idea to a trillion-dollar asset.
It really has. And a lot of experts, even the Wall Street Journal, are pointing to President-elect Trump's pro-crypto stance as a potential catalyst. What do you think? Is this political support driving the rally?
It's definitely playing a role, but we can't ignore Bitcoin's fixed supply. Unlike traditional currencies, there's a limited number of Bitcoin that can ever exist. That scarcity combined with growing demand is a huge factor.
So for our listeners who are already familiar with Bitcoin, is this the moment it finally hits the mainstream? Could this impact their crypto investments?
It's definitely a milestone to watch. What happens next is anyone's guess. But it's clear that Bitcoin is no longer on the sidelines.
Now let's shift gears to the UK, where the Bank of England is hinting at potential interest rate cuts in 2025. CNBC reported that Governor Andrew Bailey suggested as many as 4 cuts. Is this a real possibility?
Well, the UK economy is in a delicate spot. They're trying to tame inflation, which has been cooling faster than expected, but also support economic growth. Rate cuts could boost spending and investment, but they also risk reigniting inflation.
It's a tough balancing act. So for those listening in the UK, how might these potential rate cuts affect your personal finances? Could this be a good time to get a mortgage, or should you be adjusting your savings strategy?
It's definitely worth considering.
Now let's head over to Europe, where things are getting pretty dramatic. CNBC reported that the French government just collapsed after a no-confidence vote. It all stems from a snap election that led to a hung parliament, making it almost impossible to pass a budget.
And MarketWatch suggests that investors might start pressuring France to get its spending under control, which could have repercussions across the Eurozone.
And it's not just France. South Korea is dealing with its own political turmoil after President Yoon's controversial martial law declaration, and then the reversal. The South Korean one is taking a hit, and there were calls for impeachment. So we've got 2 politically charged situations. How do you think they'll play out differently in the markets?
That's a good question. While both situations involve political instability, their potential global impact is different. France's situation raises concerns about the Eurozone as a whole, while South Korea's seems more localized. But this uncertainty is definitely putting pressure on the euro.
And CNBC noted that some analysts believe Bitcoin's surge is partly due to investors seeking refuge from this turmoil in traditional markets. Is Bitcoin becoming a safe haven asset?
It's a question a lot of people are asking, and it's fascinating to see how Bitcoin, initially designed to exist outside traditional systems, might be becoming a haven within them.
Okay, let's step away from politics for a moment and look at the auto industry. Specifically, GM is making some big moves in China.
Big and expensive. CNBC reported that General Motors is restructuring its Chinese operations, and it's going to cost them over $5 billion. They're expecting plant closures and a smaller footprint. What's your take on this?
It's a bold move.
Yeah.
But U.S. automakers are facing some serious challenges in China. The rise of nationalism, the shift towards electric vehicles, the competition is fierce.
And GM isn't alone. The Wall Street Journal mentioned that the German auto industry is struggling too, with factory orders down because of weaker demand for cars. So what does this mean for the global auto industry? What does it mean for manufacturing in China?
We seem to be witnessing a major shift in manufacturing, driven by changing consumer tastes, tech advancements, and global politics.
It's a lot for companies to navigate.
And for individuals whose livelihoods depend on this industry.
Absolutely.
All right, before we move on, let's do a quick rundown of some other market movers. What do we have?
Hit me.
Well, CNBC reported that JetBlue is cutting unprofitable routes and changing up its European flights.
Okay.
Oil prices are fluctuating, according to CNBC, ahead of an OPEC Plus decision on supply. And get this, the U.S. stock market is hitting record highs. Bloomberg suggests it's because investors are reacting positively to Trump's policy announcements, particularly his crypto-friendly SEC pick.
Interesting. MarketWatch even suggested that this could pave the way for more crypto ETFs.
So we've got Bitcoin's rise, a potential shift in U.S. policy, and a soaring stock market. It's like all these pieces are creating this upward momentum. But how long can it last?
That's the big question. These gains might not be sustainable in the long run. even with record highs. It's crucial to remember your own investment goals and risk tolerance. Don't get caught up in the hype without carefully evaluating your own financial situation.
Very wise words.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of part 1 of our deep dives.
Wow.
Stay with us. We'll be back with part 2, where we'll unpack even more of these headlines and discuss what they mean for you.
Can't wait. You know, it's fascinating to watch how the traditional financial world is reacting to Bitcoin.
It really is.
Yeah.
We're kind of caught between embracing it, citing it, or just, pretending it's not happening.
Exactly. But ignoring it is getting harder, especially with President-elect Trump seemingly in the crypto corner. It's forcing regulators and institutions to take a stand.
It's not even just about Bitcoin anymore, right? There's a whole universe of cryptocurrencies and blockchain technologies popping up.
Exactly. It's like a new financial frontier is opening up, and everyone wants a piece of the action.
It is an exciting time to be following these markets, but we can't lose sight of the real-world impact of all this. Remember, we talked about potential job losses in the auto industry, but these ripple effects could go way beyond manufacturing.
Absolutely right. Anytime you have massive shifts in global industries, there will be winners and losers. Some jobs will disappear while new opportunities emerge.
It's almost like a technological evolution is happening. And with evolution comes adaptation and sometimes a little bit of chaos.
But that's where innovation thrives. We're seeing companies and individuals having to think outside the box and adapt.
Speaking of adapting, JetBlue's decision to cut those unprofitable routes and adjust its European flights. That's a perfect example of how companies are constantly adjusting to a changing market.
It is. It's a strategic move to streamline operations and focus on those more profitable markets. Shows how important flexibility is when consumer demand is always changing.
It's like they're admitting their initial plan didn't quite work and they're willing to pivot. That kind of agility is essential in business these days.
And it's not just about reacting to pressures. Companies also need to anticipate future trends and be ready for them.
Which brings us to the upcoming OPEC Plus meeting. Remember, CNBC mentioned that oil prices are on everyone's radar as the group decides on those supply cuts.
Yeah, this meeting's outcome could have a huge impact on global energy markets and even the wider economy. It just shows how interconnected everything is. Decisions made in one part of the world can have ripple effects across the globe.
It really is a complex interplay of supply and demand in geopolitics.
Exactly, and the stakes are high, especially with everything going on in the Middle East.
And speaking of uncertainty, the political situations in France and South Korea add another layer of complexity. It just reinforces the idea that political stability, or the lack of it, can really impact financial markets and global economies.
Yeah, investors always want clarity and predictability.
Yeah.
When those things are missing, it leads to volatility and risk aversion.
It's like trying to captain a ship in a storm. You need a steady hand and a clear vision to get through it safely.
And sometimes you need to adjust the sails to account for the wind.
That's a great analogy. But amidst all this uncertainty and volatility, there are also some glimmers of hope and optimism.
Of course. Human ingenuity and resilience have always come through, even when things are tough.
And we can't forget the power of technology to drive positive change. We see it in advancements in renewable energy healthcare. There's a lot to be excited about.
Absolutely. We need to maintain a balanced perspective, acknowledge the challenges, but also recognize the opportunities and never underestimate the human capacity for innovation.
Well said. It reminds me of that famous Winston Churchill quote. A pessimist sees the difficulty in every opportunity. An optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty.
Exactly. It's all about how you choose to see things.
So even with all the complexities and uncertainties we've talked about today, there's reason to be hopeful about the future. The world's always evolving, and with that come new challenges and new possibilities.
It is an exciting time to be alive, and it'll be fascinating to see how everything plays out.
Absolutely. Well, that wraps up part 2 of our deep dive into the financial headlines. Stay tuned for part 3, where we'll tie everything together and leave you with some final thoughts to ponder. So as we wrap up our deep dive into these headlines, it feels like we're looking at a world in transition.
Yeah, a world in transition. We see old systems being challenged, new technologies emerging, and global power dynamics shifting. It's a time of uncertainty for sure, but also a time of massive potential.
And for our listener, it's a time to be informed, engaged, and maybe even a little bit daring.
Absolutely. We talked about Bitcoin hitting those new highs, but it's not just about the price, right? It's about the underlying technology and how it could disrupt traditional finance. It's about the rise of decentralized systems and maybe a shift in power away from those big institutions.
It feels like a whole new way of thinking about Money and value is emerging. And it's happening right now.
And while some people see that as a threat, others see it as a chance to create a fairer, more transparent, and accessible financial system.
It's a fascinating debate that'll probably go on for years. But no matter where you stand on crypto, the financial landscape is definitely changing.
Definitely. And this transformation is being driven by a bunch of things, from technology and politics to changing consumer tastes.
It's a complex web, but by understanding the individual pieces and how they connect, we can start to see that bigger picture.
And that's what we try to do in these deep dives. Give you not just the headlines, but the context, the analysis, and the insights to help you make sense of this ever-changing world.
We've explored the potential impact of those interest rate cuts in the UK, the ripple effects of the political turmoil in Europe and South Korea, the challenges facing the auto industry, and the volatility in oil prices.
And we touched on those broader themes like technological disruption, globalization, and the search for value and stability in a world that feels anything but stable.
It is a lot to take in, I know.
Yeah.
But hopefully you're walking away from this deep dive feeling a little more informed, a little more engaged, and maybe even inspired to dig a little deeper into these topics.
Because knowledge is power, right? The more we understand about the forces shaping our world, the better equipped we are to deal with the challenges and seize the opportunities.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Oh.
So as we wrap up today, we want to leave you with a thought-provoking question. If the world really is on the verge of a major financial shift, what role will you play? Will you just watch it happen or be a part of it?
The choice is yours. But remember, even inaction is a choice, so choose wisely and stay informed.
Well said. That's all for our deep dive today. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you back here tomorrow morning with new headlines from the major financial magazines. Until then, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.